Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chev Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamati Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhakti Nashtaki. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, ninth chapter, answers by citing the Lord's version, text number 43. So now Brahmaji, after having darshan of the Lord, having heard instructions from the Lord, now he is speaking to Narad Muni. Tushtam nishame pitaram lokanam prapitamaham devarshi pari papricha bhavanyan manu prichati. Okay, of course, this conversation actually is being told by Shukdev Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. The great sage Narad also inquired in detail from his father Brahma, the great grandfather of all the universe, after seeing him well satisfied. The process of understanding spiritual or transcendental knowledge from the realized person is not exactly like asking an ordinary question from the schoolmaster. The schoolmasters in the modern days are paid agents for giving some information, but the spiritual master is not a paid agent, nor can he impart instruction without being authorized. In the Bhagavad Gita, the process of understanding transcendental knowledge is described as follows. So Prabhupada is making this distinction between a paid agent as a school teacher versus a spiritual master. So spiritual master, he was, in this case, Brahmaji was very well satisfied by Narad's attitude, his serving attitude, his humility, his perseverance, and that's when he answered. And Narad Muni also inquired in detail. It wasn't like he was stuck with only the coursework, and that's all he wanted to know. He inquired in detail about Krishna, Krishna's energies. Arjun was advised to receive transcendental knowledge from the realized person by surrender, questions, and service. Receiving transcendental knowledge is not like exchanging dollars. Such knowledge has to be received by service to the spiritual master. As Brahmaji received the knowledge directly from the Lord by satisfying him fully, similarly, one has to receive the transcendental knowledge from the spiritual master by satisfying him. The spiritual master's satisfaction is a means of assimilating transcendental knowledge. One cannot understand transcendental knowledge simply by becoming a grammarian. Means just by learning Sanskrit or grammar of Sanskrit or different parts of Sanskrit. Sanskrit has logic and nyaya and so many different aspects. But simply by understanding that one cannot receive the transcendental knowledge, one cannot understand it. The way is to serve a spiritual master, humbly serve him, approach him, and inquire from him. The Vedas declare that only unto one who has unflinching devotion to the Lord and to the spiritual master does transcendental knowledge become automatically revealed. Such relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master is eternal. One who is now the disciple is the next spiritual master, and one cannot be a bona fide and authorized spiritual master unless one has been strictly obedient to his spiritual master. So this is what Prabhupada, um, from his example, he showed us how he served his spiritual master, how he followed the instructions of his spiritual master to the core, and then he became the spiritual master. It wasn't that Prabhupada became spiritual master by paying money or by popular votes or anything else. Or on his own, he just sat in a cave and he said, "Oh, I got this revelation. Oh, I'm the spiritual master of everybody." It wasn't like that. He served, he followed, he asked questions, inquired from the spiritual master. And this is what Prabhupada is saying. One who is a a good disciple, he becomes a good spiritual master. Brahmaji, as a disciple of the Supreme Lord, received the real knowledge and imparted to his dear disciple Narad. And similarly, Narad, the spiritual master, handed over this knowledge to Vyasa and so on. Therefore, the so-called formal spiritual master and disciple are not facsimiles of Brahma and Narad or Narad and Vyas. Facsimile means the fax copy, exact copy. It's not that. The relationship between Brahma and Narad is reality, while the so-called formality is a relation between the cheater and the cheated. So that relation or service attitude or compassion of the spiritual master towards his disciple, that cannot be copied. And it's not a formality. It's a, like Prabhupada said, it's an eternal relationship. So it's very, very special relationship. And one has to approach it properly. It's clearly mentioned herewith that Narad is not only well behaved, meek, and obedient, but also self controlled. One who is not self controlled, specifically in sex life, can neither become a disciple nor a spiritual master. One must have disciplinary training in controlling speaking, anger, the tongue, the mind, the belly, and the genitals. One who has controlled the particular senses mentioned above is called a Goswami. Without becoming a Goswami, one can become neither a disciple nor a spiritual master. The so called spiritual master without sense control is certainly the cheater, and the disciple of such a so called spiritual master is the cheated. So, Prabhupada is clearly mentioning here about controlling of all the senses to become a spiritual master. And specifically, sex life, he wrote down. So, one has to be very careful when one wants to become a spiritual master, when one is a spiritual master. One should not think of Brahmaji as a dead great grandfather, as we have experienced on this planet. He is the oldest great grandfather and he is still living, and Narad is also living. The age of the inhabitants of the Brahma Loka planet is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. Inhabitants of this small planet Earth can hardly calculate even the duration of one day of Brahma. So Brahmaji is not dead. Of course, when Brahmaji dies, the whole universe will be finished. If the universe is still there, means Brahmaji is still there, obviously. And Narad Muni is also there. He is spiritual. He has a spiritual body anyway. But one thing, see here in this relationship, Brahmaji is living entity with a material body, and Narad Muni has a spiritual body, like we have read in the previous chapters of Srimad Bhagavatam. Still, Narad Muni is a disciple of Brahmaji. This is amazing relationship. So, anybody, even a living entity like Brahmaji, he got a chance to become spiritual master of Narad Muni, based on his qualification, based on his service to the Supreme Lord, based on his austerities that by which he pleased the Supreme Lord. So this is a altogether different relationship. Text 44. Tasmaidam Bhagavatam Puranam Dashlakshanam Proktam Bhagavata Praha Prita Putraya Bhutakrit. Thereupon the supplementary Vedic literature, Srimad Bhagavatam, which was described by the personality of Godhead and which contains 10 characteristics, was told with satisfaction by the father Brahma to his son Narad. Although the Srimad Bhagavatam was spoken in 4 verses, it had 10 characteristics, which will be explained in the next chapter. In the 4 verses, it is first said that the Lord existed before the creation, and thus the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam includes the Vedanta aphorism Janmadi Asya. Janmadi Asya is the beginning. Yet the 4 verses in which it is said that the Lord is the root of everything that be, beginning from the creation up to the supreme abode of the Lord, naturally explains the 10 characteristics. One should not misunderstand by wrong interpretations that the Lord spoke only 4 verses, and therefore all the rest of the 17,994 verses are useless. Well, actually, I think it should be 17,996 because total is 18,000 verses. The 10 characteristics, as will be explained in the next chapter, require so many verses just to explain them properly. Brahmaji had also advised Narad previously that he should expand the idea he had heard from Brahmaji. So whatever Narad Muni is hearing from Brahmaji, Brahmaji is asking him to expand it, just like he is going to expand the 4 shlokas that he heard from Krishna. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed this to Srila Rupa Goswami in a nutshell, but the disciple Rupa Goswami expanded this very elaborately. And the same subject was further expanded by Srila Jiva Goswami and even further by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. We are just trying to follow in the footsteps of all these authorities. So Prabhupada is taking a very humble position. He's saying, I'm just trying to follow in the footsteps. But without Prabhupada's these ecstatic purports, we won't be even able to understand even one word of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Srimad Bhagavatam is not like ordinary fiction or mundane literature. It's unlimited in strength, and however one may expand it according to one's own ability, Bhagavad cannot be expansion. Srimad Bhagavatam, being the sound representation of the Lord, is simultaneously explained in 4 verses and in the 4 billion verses all the same, in as much as the Lord is smaller than the atom and bigger than the unlimited sky. Such is the potency of Srimad Bhagavatam. Beautiful. Bhagavatam is not only 18,000 verses. Bhagavatam is not only 4 verses. Bhagavatam is just like we read earlier that in the heavenly planets, Bhagavatam is 1 lakh verses. But Bhagavatam is what? It's not just a book of fixed number of verses that we just memorize and we can speak and this Bhagavatam is and outside it is nothing. Bhagavatam is whatever describes wherever the glories of the Lord, devotion service, and like we will study in the next chapter, 10 characteristics are described. That is Srimad Bhagavatam. So howsoever the reader, the speaker can expand it based on his realizations, based on the mercy of Krishna, giving him to expand based on his understanding, his consciousness. That is Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not just one fixed number of verses. It's not a textbook. So we have to approach Bhagavatam in that manner. Now, why 10 characteristics? These 10 characteristics are the basis of any scripture, and we'll go through that next chapter, and that describes the scripture actually. So that and Bhagavatam fits perfectly in those 10 characteristics. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 45. Narada praha munye sarvastyastate nripa dhyayate brahma paramam vyasyamita tejase. In succession, O king, the great sage Narad instructed Srimad Bhagavatam unto the unlimitedly powerful Vyasadeva, who meditated in devotional service upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth, on the bank of the river Saraswati. So Vyasadeva, when he was meditating in devotional service and when he was completely bewildered because he has described everything, Karmakanda, Jnanakanda, and everything in all the literature, but he hadn't described the glories of Krishna, glories of devotional service. So that's when he was not satisfied, he was bewildered. Narad Muni appeared over there, so Narad Muni instructed Srimad Bhagavatam to Vyasadeva. Now, Narad Muni did not write it down or did not instruct 18,000 verses to Vyasadeva. And then Vyasadeva expanded on whatever instructions he received. So it all become part of Srimad Bhagavatam. In the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, fifth chapter, verse 13, Narad instructed the great sage Vyasadeva as follows. O greatly fortunate, pious householder, your name and fame are universal, and you are fixed in the absolute truth with spotless character and infallible vision. I ask you to meditate upon the activities of the personality of Godhead, whose activities are unparalleled. So, in the disciplic succession of the Brahma Sampradaya, the practice of yoga meditation is not neglected. But the devotees of Bhakti Yogis, they do not undertake the trouble to meditate upon the impersonal Brahman. As indicated here, they meditate on Brahma Paramam, or the Supreme Brahman. So they meditate on the Supreme Brahman. Brahman realization begins from the impersonal effulgence, but by further progress of such meditation, manifestation of the Supreme Soul, Paramatma realization takes place. In progressing further, realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is fixed. Sri Narad Muni, as a spiritual master of Vyasadeva, knew very well the position of Vyasadeva, and thus he certified the qualities of Srila Vyasadeva as fixed in the absolute truth with great vow, etc. Narad advised meditation upon the transcendental activities of the Lord. Impersonal Brahman has no activities, but the personality of Godhead has many activities, and all such activities are transcendental, without any tinge of material quality. If the activities of the Supreme Brahman were material activities, then Narad would not have advised Vyasadeva to meditate upon them, and the Param Brahma is Lord Shri Krishna as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna is Param Brahma, and even Arjun had confirmed that. And Narad Muni asked Vyasadeva to meditate on the activities, on the pastimes of Krishna. When Vyasadeva fixed his mind in meditation, he did it in Bhakti Yoga trance and actually saw the Supreme Person with Maya, the illusory energy, in contraposition. Means he saw both Krishna and Maya standing side by side. As we have discussed before, the Lord's Maya or illusion is also a representation because Maya has no existence without the Lord. Darkness is not independent of light. Without light, no one can experience the contraposition of darkness. However, this Maya or illusion cannot overcome the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but stands apart from Him, apashrayam. Therefore, perfection of meditation is realization of the personality of Godhead, along with His transcendental activities. Meditation on the impersonal Brahman is a troublesome business for the meditator. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, klesho diktarastesham avyakta sakta chetasa. So, Narad Muni was meditating on the Supreme Lord, and this was Narad Muni. Vyasadeva was meditating, and Narad Muni asked him to meditate on the activities of the Lord. And that was a correct meditation. Text 46. Yad utaham tvaya prishto vairajat purushad idam yathasi tad upakyaste prashnan anyans chakritsnana krishnashaha. O King, your questions as to how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions, I shall answer in detail by explanation of the 4 verses already mentioned. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, this great transcendental literature is the ripened fruit of the tree of Vedic knowledge. And therefore, all questions that can be humanly possible regarding the universal affairs beginning from its creation are all answered in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The answers depend only on the qualification of the person who explains them. The 10 divisions of Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained by the great speaker Srila Shukdev Goswami, are the limitation of all questions, and intelligent persons will derive all intellectual benefits from them by proper utilization. So, Shukdev Goswami had asked him the question, asked Parikshit, I'm sorry, Parikshit Maharaj had asked a question to Shukdev Goswami how the universe became manifested from the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead, as well as other questions. So Shukdev Goswami is going to answer, and he in fact told that these questions were asked by Narad Muni to Brahmaji, and Brahmaji had asked these questions to the Lord. Lord answered these questions in 4 verses, and then Brahmaji answered some of Narad Muni's questions. Narad Muni answered some of Vyasadev's questions. And Shukdev Goswami thinks, this is how I'm answering your questions. So many questions, answers are going on. And at the same time, there's a conversation between Sud Goswami and the sages in Naimisharanya is also going on. So they all put together in the book form of Srimad Bhagavatam, which we are studying. But Srimad Bhagavatam, as we have discussed earlier, is not just a combination of 18,000 verses. It's much more than that. And then there are 10 divisions, which we'll speak of in the next chapter. And here we are, in fact, finishing the 9th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, completing the 9th chapter. So from tomorrow, we'll start discussing the 10th chapter. And let's see what are those 10 divisions or 10 characteristics or 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam. So it's flowing very beautifully, and I hope you all are enjoying it. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.